Hello everyone, Immanence here. This will be a super guide with a lot of information and tips for beginners in Temtem. If you don't know this game yet, in short, Temtem is a massive multiplayer online game inspired by Pokemon. Before we start, I just have to say that I'm from Brazil and English is not my mother language, so I apologize in advance if I say something incorrectly. That said, let's jump to the guide. The first thing is about the starter choice. Unlike Pokemon, here in Temtem, the choice for the starter is not that meaningful, and this is because we will be able to find and capture all 3 starters in the wild. Currently, we all have access to Crystal at the 3rd island, and this is why a lot of videos recommend you to pick one of the other 2, because these other 2, Smazy and Hootchick, will be available only in the last island of Arbory. In my opinion, pick whichever you want. These 3 are pretty cool, and you can also don't play with your starter at all, you can just leave it at your 10 deck. Now let's talk about this game's battle system. The most remarkable thing, in my opinion, is that Temtem battles don't have any random elements. This means that we don't have critical hit chance or any kind of failure, evasion or dodge. Everything that happens in a Temtem battle is a very precise and exact calculation between your Temtem's attack or special attack and his target's defense or special defense, and of course the elements involved. Since I mentioned the elements, in Temtem we have 12 elements, 12 types, and this is pretty standard like so many games where one element is stronger to other one and weak to another. You take some time to memorize and learn how this typing works, but you can use this image here as a guide. The arrows are pointing to the types that element is strong against. As you play the game, you realize that there is this color bar behind every technique, every skill. This color represents one of the 12 elements, 12 types. Until you learn all the colors, you can click the skill to pop up its information, including its element. The damage calculation for types in Temtem is quite simple. You deal normal damage, 100% of your damage, or double damage or half your damage. For instance, if you're using a water type technique against a nature Temtem, you deal only half of your damage. And if you use the same water technique against a fire Temtem, you deal double damage. Keep in mind that these resistances and weaknesses equalize in double type Temtem. For instance, let's consider Fire Koish, which is both fire and water type. For being fire, he would resist nature attacks, taking only half of the damage. But for being water, he would be fragile to nature attacks, taking double damage. Since this Temtem is both fire and water, he wouldn't take neither double, neither half the damage, but the normal damage. You can also double your resistances in some cases. Vulcrane, for instance, is both fire and earth type. These 2 elements are resistant to crystal type attacks, so if you use a crystal attack against Vulcrane, he'll take only 1/4 of the damage. But for being fire and earth, these Temtem also are 2 times weak to water, meaning that if you attack Vulcrane using water, you deal 4 times your damage. When battling in Temtem, you may notice that there is this target circle below Temtem's that changes its color. Red means your technique will be resisted, dealing only half of your damage. Green otherwise means your technique will deal double damage. White means that technique will do normal damage, or that you don't have the information for that Temtem. In order to access this information, you must have captured before the Temtem you are targeting. This information is saved on your Tempedia, which is like a Pokédex when you first capture that Temtem species. This is why it's so important to capture at least one of each Temtem you see in the wild, even if you won't use it. So capture Temtems in order to record their information on your Tempedia. And this brings to another tip. Once you reach Amnesia, the 2nd island, you have access to this NPC here called Freetem. This is an association that will reward you for each Temtem you release. You can make some good pansons doing this. Compared to Pokemon's Pokeball, 10 cards are very cheap, so this game encourages us to capture Temtem and release them. One important thing you may have noticed on your skills are these little diagonal bars, dashes or lines on the colored background. Each bar indicates 1 turn of hold for that technique. 1 turn of hold means you need to wait 1 turn to use that technique. Some techniques have 2 or even 3 bars. and after you cast that technique, you have to wait again for that many turns. The turn passage from one to another happens by the end of all animations, and this is when all holds are removed from techniques. So if you swap one of your Tems, this one that enters the battlefield will also lose one hold on the following turn, since this Temtem was already on the battlefield when the turn passed. Unlike Pokemon, we don't cast our techniques based on charges. We use our techniques by spending stamina, just like some games where you consume mana or energy points, something like that. And this is very unique compared to Pokemon, because you have to manage our stamina while fighting. Every turn, Temtems recover a little bit of stamina based on their total. In the beginning, it's like 2 or 3 points per turn. You can also click on the clock icon to rest instead of attacking, and this will make your Temtem to recover a lot more stamina on that turn. You can also use swap in order to manage stamina, because all of your Temtems that are not in the field fighting also recover stamina each turn. So if one of your Tems are low on stamina, swap it with another one in order to let him rest out of the fight. Keep in mind that if one of your Temtems uses more stamina than he has, he'll take a chunk of damage based on how much extra stamina he needed, and along with this damage penalty, this Temtem will also be overexerted on the next turn, not being able to use techniques. You will only be able to swap it, use an item, or rest. And this is one of the reasons why, even if you won't use a full team of 6 Temtems in the beginning, walk with 6 Temtems, because the secondary ones, let's say that way, can be swapped into the fight in order to take damage as your main Temtems recover stamina. This also means that these Temtems are also making the opposing team to use their stamina or even hold skills. Also about techniques, some have this little plus icon on the top corner indicating synergy. If you click this technique, you'll see which element this tech has synergy with. This means that if you are casting this technique while using by your side another Temtem from that element on the synergy, this technique's synergy will be activated, changing its damage, cost, speed, effect, or even the element type of the technique. Keep this in mind because there are a lot of amazing combos in this game. While playing, you will also find this type of item called TC, Technique Course. These are very similar to Pokemon's HMs. They are not consumable, and you can use this indefinitely to teach techniques to your Temtems. Note that not every Temtem can learn every TC. You can use Google or Wikia to search which techs each Temtem can learn. Also, just like Pokemon, Temtem have stab damage. Stab stands for same type attack bonus, meaning that if you use a water technique from a water Temtem, this technique will deal 50% more damage. I'm saying this because some Temtems have access to techs from a different element. And also about techniques, if you click for its information, you'll be able to check which kind that technique is. It can be a normal or physical attack with this little star icon, or a special attack with this swirl icon, or a buff or debuff technique indicated by this little spiral icon. This information can help you decide which technique to use for every Temtem, because if you take some particular Temtem and check for its statuses and see that it has more attack than special attack, you can then focus its moveset on physical skills, the ones with the star icon. Lastly, about techniques, there's these little arrows here indicating priority. To keep it simple, more the arrows, more of your Temtem's speed will be calculated. If the technique has 2 arrows, it's a normal speed technique. It calculates the total speed of your Temtem. 1 arrow means that this is a slow skill, using only half of your Temtem's speed on the equation. 3 arrows indicates a high priority skill, calculating 2 times your Temtem's speed. Some techniques have even higher speed like Ninja Jutsu, which uses more speed than the 3 prior moves, indicated by 3 arrows and a plus icon. Note that these arrows indicates only how much of your Temtem's speed will be calculated, so a slow Temtem using a 3 prior move with 3 arrows may attack before a naturally fast Temtem using a 2 prior move with 2 arrows. The order of things happening each turn is the swaps first, then the items, for instance the cards for capturing, and lastly the techniques according to its priorities and their caster's speed. Currently, there is only one skill in the game, which is special speed indicated by 3 arrows and a star. This skill is called Cage, which traps all Tentens on the field, applying this status here called Trapped, that prevents all Tenten from being swapped. This is a very strategical one. And about this trapped condition, during Temtem battles, there are two types of changes that can happen. The first one is stage changes, that buffs or debuffs Tenten's speed, defenses, and attacks. This is indicated by these up and down arrows on the fight. The other change is a status condition change, like freeze, burn, sleep, etc. These are represented by icons below the health bar. Keep in mind that every Tenten can only be affected by 2 conditions each time. This means that if a Tenten is already affected by 2 statuses like freeze and trapped, and you try to apply another one, like poison for instance, the second one will be removed in order to apply the poison. In the future, I intend to make a more detailed video about these conditions. Tentens can also equip items called gears. You receive these as quest rewards and exploring the game. Some of these are very helpful. One, for instance, called Coward's Cloak, is just like XP Share in Pokemon. You can equip this item on one of your Tentens, and this Tenten will gain XP, experience, even without joining the battles. And there is one great active item called Temessence Vial, which resurrects and heals all your team once. You receive this near the start of your journey, and it's represented by this Vial icon. Note that this icon is full, and once used, it will be represented as an empty bottle. In order to fill it again, you just have to go to any Temporium, the medical center, to heal your Tentens and refill the vial. Temporiums are represented by this white square icon with a triangle on the map. While grinding, try to stay close to Temporiums, but don't forget your vial. Now let's talk about Tenten themselves. When you capture or receive a Tenten, you'll see this screen. In this chart, at the first column, are the actual statuses of your Tenten, his HP, stamina, speed, defenses, and attacks. These numbers are calculated using base statuses fixed for every Tenten species. You can check the base statuses for each Tenten on your Tempedia. These statuses can be improved by your SVs and TVs. SVs are the second column, indicating the single values. For each one of the 7 statuses, this can vary from 1 to 50. In the wild, those numbers are random, but it's possible to make a perfect Tenten through breeding, with all SVs on 50. But breeding a perfect Tenten is a very complex and expensive process, so this is for the very end game and content for another video. The third column are the TVs, the training values. Training, because you gain these by defeating or capturing Tentens. Each Tenten yields TVs after defeated or captured. You can check this on your Tempedia as well. One Tenten can have at maximum 1000 distributed TVs, and a maximum of 500 points of TV in one single status. While doing this story, I don't recommend you to be concerned about TVs, because in order to train 1000 TVs for each Tenten of yours would take a lot of time and effort. It just doesn't worth it, since you can beat the story using only Tentens with all red SVs and all TVs mixed up. But since SVs, the single values, vary randomly in the wild, once you decide which Tenten to use, you can keep capturing it until you find some with good statuses, at least non-red on everything. For instance, if you use a Tenten that has a lot of good special attacks, you can keep capturing until you find one with good SP attack SV. Every Tenten can have one between 2 possible traits. Traits are like passive abilities. Only a few are bad things, but most of them are very good and some are really amazing. You can also check the 2 possible traits in your Tempedia. There are 2 trait slots, one above and one below. Keep in mind that once a Tenten evolves, that trait will change, but the trait slot won't. For instance, if I have an amphibian crystal, when it evolves to Sherald, its trait will still be the first slot trait, in this case Bihori. And since I mentioned this, let's talk about evolutions. Unlike Pokemon, Tentens don't evolve based in absolute levels. For example, in Pokemon, no matter which game you are playing, no matter how many Metapods you capture, every single Metapod in Pokemon universe will evolve to Butterfree at level 10. This is an absolute evolution level. Here, this level is relative. Relative to what? Relative to the level you capture this Temtem or gained from some NPC or hatched its egg. For instance, if a Temtem evolves after 20 levels, and you captured it at level 5, this Temtem will evolve at level 25. If you capture this Temtem at level 10, it will evolve at level 30, and so on. Note that hatched Temtems from eggs always come at level 1, so they evolve much sooner. After the second island, Amnesia, you can use the breeder NPC to make Temtems that will evolve faster. You just have to capture one female and one male from the chosen Temtem and leave it at the NPC for a few minutes. Let's say you are doing the quest for Amnesia, the second island, and you want to use some of these Temtems you find here. Most of these Temtems are around level 20, and they evolve after 15 or even 20 levels. If you use a captured one, it will evolve only after level 30 or even 40, but if you use a breeded one, it hatches at level 1, so it will evolve much sooner, around 20s. So after the second island, I recommend you to use breeding, just to have access to evolution sooner. And since we talked about breeding, you may have noticed that some of my Temtems in this video have this egg icon on some of their techniques. This indicates an egg move. Egg move because a Temtem can only learn this skill through breeding. If you find this Temtem in the wild, at normal conditions, it will never learn an egg move. In order to get that egg move, you must breed a female from that specific Temtem and a male from the same type, the same element, but a different species that learns the technique naturally. This is kinda complex, so I'll give you a detailed example. Let's say we want a Ganki with the egg move Tesla Prism. Tesla Prism is a very nice technique, but Gankis captured in nature don't have access to this technique. So I need to breed a female Ganki, because female is the one that defines which Temtem will be in the egg, and a male from the same type, in this case wind or electric, that learns naturally the technique Tesla Prism. Here I use this Nesla, which is water and electric type, and for being electric, it can make babies with a female Ganki. And now I can talk about fertility. If you look at your Temtem's chart, you see this little branch icon. Every leaf and this stem represents one fertility. Every Temtem has a maximum of 8 fertility and it loses 1 every time it breeds. For example, if I breed 2 Temtems with 7 fertility each, by the end of the breeding process, both parents will have 6 fertility and the baby also will have 6 fertility. Keep in mind that the baby's fertility is affected by the parent with the less fertility, and this is why it's so important to breed only Temtems with the same fertility. If you use 2 Temtems with different fertilities, like I'm doing here in this video, one parent having 7 fertility and one having 8, the baby will hatch with only 6 fertility, so don't do this, I'm just showing how to pass an egg move. Another thing is that the male parent that will pass on the egg move must have this egg move equipped. Unlike most Pokemon games, every technique your Temtem learns is kept there recorded on a second list called Learn Techniques. You can change and manage your techniques anytime outside battles, but in order to pass the Tesla Prism egg move, I must equip this technique on my Nesla before leaving it at the breeder NPC. In this screen we can see how the statuses for the babies work. In the first column, we have the worst possible status considering both parents. In the middle column, we have the average for each status, considering the best and the worst on parents, and the last column indicates the best possible status from their parents. We have 20% chance of hatching with the worst status, 40% of being the average one, and 40% of hatching with the best possible status. You can also use an item called DNA Strand to assure that some status will pass for the baby, but this costs a lot and is only recommended on endgame breeding for perfect Tems. Still about these egg moves, they implemented in the game this type of item called ETC, Egg Move Technique Course. Unlike normal TCs, these items are consumable and very rare. With this, you can teach an egg move technique to a Temtem captured in the wild. For instance, I have this Luma Platymus. Lumas are like Temtem's shiny. But since I captured this in nature, he won't have access to its egg moves, like Urushio. But with the ETC Urushio, I can teach this technique to him. I just have to use the item, apply to him, And now, this Luma Platypus has Urushiol among his learned techniques forever, even if I don't use it. But since these items are rare loots and quite expensive sometimes, if you get one, don't use it recklessly. In the beginning of your journey, you receive from Professor Constantinos this little toucan here called Tuwai. Tuwai is a very interesting Tenten because he has a different evolution process. Like Eevee on Pokemon, Tuwais can evolve to different types of Tenten, and it doesn't evolve based on levels. In order to evolve a Tuwai, you must bring it to the chosen element's shrine. I won't give a spoiler about the elements, but right now we have access to 5 shrines in the game and so 5 different toucans. And here is one last tip, you probably may have heard this before in other videos. It's about capturing and using a Ganki for the first island. This is because we have 12 types of Tenten distributed among the 6 islands of the archipelago as 2 predominant types for each island. And in the Nis, the first island, the predominant types among the Tentens in the wild there are wind and water, and Ganki, for being electric, happens to counter both these elements, dealing double damage and taking only half. Keep in mind that you also find, even at the dojo leader, Tentens from different types, so it's very important to have a versatile team to cover different threats. In the future, I will be making videos about which Tenten to use for each island, the possible Gankis, let's say that way, for every other dojo, so stay tuned to my channel. I worked a lot to bring this video to you, so I hope it helped someone. Feel free to comment below if you have any suggestion or even correction. I'm very open to that. Also, feel free to like this video and share it, and of course, subscribe to my channel if you want to. I'll be very happy. Thanks and see you in the next video. Bye bye.